9 discoveries that scared archaeologists. 9. Lady Rye. To see humans in their state and knowing that how that they lived thousands of years ago is a bit crazy. This mummy belongs to Egypt, which is of a woman known as Lady Rye. She was approximately 30 to 40 years old when she passed away in the year 1530 BC. She worked as a nursemaid for an ancient Egyptian queen. What's incredible about her mummy is that her hair is exactly preserved in the same when she was alive, and it also seems to be growing. Her mummy is one of the ancient mummies in the world. She is one of the earliest human who suffered from a disease called atherosclerosis. In this disease the plaque rises up around the artery walls, diminishing the flow of the blood. This leads to several blood clots. 8. Ramses II. He was one of the most famous Egyptian leaders. He lived long, for up to 90 years old. Finding someone surviving for this long was a miracle. It's believed that he had over 100 children. His mummy was discovered in 1881 by archaeologists. It was baffling for them to see how impressive the mummy looked. It was 1974 when the condition of the mummy started to deteriorate. After that the mummy was made to travel to France for its treatment. A passport was issued under his name and his occupation was given as king, deceased. The mummy received full royalty welcome, which is given in France even today to special royals. 7. King Tutankhamun. Also known as King Tut, became a ruler at a very young age. He got all the power when he was only 9 years old. His mummy got discovered in the Valleys of Kings in 1922, which gave him extra fame. His tomb was very lavish. Various kinds of jewelry and ancient treasures were found with it. His funerary mask was extra detailed and was made of solid gold. His mummy is also famous for freeing the curse. Revealing an ancient Egyptian tomb is considered to lay a curse upon whoever decides to open it. The person who dared to open the tomb, named Lord Carnarvon, passed away within days after committing the act due to a mosquito bite. 6. Crocodile mummy. The Nile River crocodile is known for being the largest crocodile species in the world. They are known as very vicious animals. Ancient Egyptians actually preserved few of these crocodiles as mummy. These mummies were believed to signify the ancient Egyptian deity known as Sobek. It was usually represented with the head of a crocodile. These crocodiles were also famous for their speed and fertility among ancient Egyptians. They also recycled papyrus scraps on which they have earlier written on, to stuff the animals. After the discovery of these crocodiles, those written pieces were found out with them. 5. Gazelle mummy. Gazelles were also preserved by the late period of Egyptian civilization. This gazelle was a pet animal that belonged to a queen. The way this gazelle was preserved was surprising to the archaeologists. It received the same treatment as a human mummy would receive. It was also honored with a royal burial just like that of a queen or a king. This only depicts what importance animals held in the ancient Egypt Empire. 4. Mud-covered mummy. Mummies usually were covered with some materials or resins to protect them and preserve them. However, when Australian archaeologists found that a mummy was covered in mud, they were stunned. Mud, of course, was cheap while resin was very expensive and only rich people could afford it. Hence, this mummy shows that how even the common people were so inspired by the idea of mummies that they used mud to preserve one to mimic the royals. This mummy was of a woman who was probably in her 20s and was placed in the coffin after a very long time had passed of her demise. 3. Infant mummies. Few infants were preserved as mummies after they passed away. Mostly, who received such treatments were the kids of kings and queens. In fact, in few cases even the fetuses have been known to be mummified. It was in the last year 2021, when archaeologists revealed a pregnant woman's mummy. She was the very first example of a pregnant mummy ever discovered. 2. Mummy with tattoos. It has become a fashion for people especially in the Western to have tattoos. However, for the tribes and religions throughout the history it was a tradition which had to be followed. At Deir el-Medina site in Egypt, archaeologists were shocked to discover that almost 7 mummified women had tattoos on their entire bodies. One mummy was calculated with 30 tattoos, which stood as the highest number of tattoos any mummified body ever had. These mummies were artisans and they worked on several art projects. It's argued that maybe their tattoos were the symbol to depict their artistic expression. 1. Chinchorro mummies. While people believe that all ancient mummies belong to ancient Egypt, that's not always the case. Some of them belong to northern Chile and southern Peru. These weren't that lavish or perfectly preserved, but they date back to 7020 BC. When the Egyptian civilization didn't even exist. Some were naturally mummified, but later they started preserving them. It included infants, men, women and anything you can possibly think of. Summing up, around 282 mummies were discovered in the area after the initial searches in the year 1917. The Chinchorro people even began to artificially mummify their deceased in 5000 BC, which is around 2000 years before the Egyptian people could even think of the idea.